to face for the Newsfirst team. I'm Niresh Eliathambi. Well, the last 2 weeks have certainly driven the blood pressure up as far as the world's people are concerned, because we don't know what's going to happen to trade, international trade, the economics of the world, exports, imports, what's going to be the price of essential items all around the world, not just in Sri Lanka. 8 billion people around the world are in suspense. And to discuss what brought all this about and the possibilities for the future, we have with us Mr. Dhananath Fernando, who is a well-known economist, and he is the CEO of Advocata. Good evening and welcome. Welcome back, Dhananath. It's been a while since you came on this show.
Good evening. Thanks, Niresh. Thanks for having me.
Right. So, Dhananath, let's talk about Mr. Trump and his strategy. Because he does have a strategy, although it just seems rather chaotic to most people in the world. Now, his end game, his strategy appears to be to have exports to every country from the US equivalent to the imports from each of those countries. Would this broadly be what he's aiming at, or what it appears that he's aiming at?
Exactly. I think it appears that's what he's aiming at. But of course, if that is the objective, I do not think it is possible, because that is not how trade works. Or it could be that he's trying this as a tool for more negotiation power with other countries and trying to teach a lesson to China, or like hold their fort a bit more and get the control back again. We really do not know. But on the first one, it is not practical. I'm sure US must know it better than we do, because the world works not only on trade. There's another component called services. If you look at the US services, they are still the main, I mean, they have a dominance all over the world. I mean, all the software, even this program users.
Absolutely.
I don't want to call any brand names, but most of the software, the cyber security apps and everything is from US.
Yes, so I mean, we don't generally focus on brand names, but if you take the top 10 largest companies in the world by capitalization, I think 8 of those 10 are American. So, you know, and they are mainly in software and all these technology aspects. So they, you know, every time you buy a laptop or a phone, it's either Chinese stuff or it's American
stuff. So it is pretty much on the services side. And I think their worry is, I think they have this recollection of memories that US was more on the manufacturing side, producing a lot of goods which are tangible. But of course, what happened over a period of time, it was not that anyone stole their jobs. It is, of course, their manufacturing jobs were taken over by the services.
Yes, and they gave the manufacturing jobs away to other countries.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's not as if China or Sri Lanka or anyone went and said, hey, close down your factories, you know, and shift to our countries.
Absolutely.
It is simply that, you know, US manufacturing is very expensive, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And the labor and so on.
Exactly. And actually they gave it to other countries for their own benefit, because if they were to produce it on their own, it could have been very expensive. So instead of that, they basically diversified their manufacturing for countries like ours, Asia, Africa, because then the labor cost, or there are the resource bases of manufacturing process is diversified. So when it comes to countries like Asia, our labor cost was reasonable, so then they could produce the same product at a much reasonable rate, which expanding the markets. I think the best example is most of the phones which are designed in California, San Francisco, is coming through China, because they do the designing, but when it comes to really assembling of those parts and components, it's much cheaper to do it in China rather than doing it in US.
So the reason that these American companies moved their production lines out of the US and to other countries, China, Malaysia, Vietnam, wherever, is simply because those American companies wanted to make bigger profits. That's it.
Absolutely.
And they did.
Absolutely. And also to serve rather than serving a smaller market, to also expand their markets by bringing the prices down, improving the quality. So that's what they did.
Right. But then this doesn't count as US exports, does it? Correct me if I'm wrong, but an American phone company which is getting its phones produced in China, and then let's say those phones, a few of them are imported to, exported out of China to Sri Lanka. It doesn't count as a US export, does it?
Absolutely, it counts as an export from that
China,
in that case China to Sri Lanka.
But the profit goes to
absolutely
the American company.
Absolutely, the part of the profit goes to the American company. So I think that's where I think that some of those profits may cover under also on the services, because it's the software and the designing that provides as a service by the US company. So that's why I said fundamentally that comparing a trade balance between country to country doesn't work. It doesn't work in personal life, it doesn't work in country, because even if you look at, like, if someone is doing let's say if someone is doing a job in a company called, let's say, Y, the company has a trade deficit with the employee because he draws a salary out. The employee has a trade surplus with that company, but if the company thinks, okay, I have a trade deficit with that particular individual, so that means you have to cut that job out. So it doesn't work. And at the same time, the same employee who draws a salary, he may have a trade deficit with the grocery store because he cannot produce all the groceries that he requires, but he has a trade surplus with the company. So basically, from the trade surplus that he has with the company Y, he sets some of it off with the grocery store, the bakery, or whatever he consumes. So that's the same way around the world. I mean, we have a trade surplus with certain countries, we have a trade deficit with certain countries, and we are trading it off based on our requirement, and that all pretty much depends on our capacity, our competitive advantage, the resources that we have, the skills, and for so many various reasons. And it's same for US. I mean, they have trade surplus with certain countries and they have a trade deficit with certain countries, and the very reason why they have a trade deficit with Sri Lanka is because most of course, the apparels, the rubber products, we produce them at a very reasonable rate, because they are getting a benefit out of manufacturing it through here, and also we are getting a benefit out of exporting to them. So it's always a win-win. I think sometimes you really cannot understand this win-win formula. You think trade is always like someone wins and the other person loses something, but that is not how it works. It's always a two-way street, and it's always win-win. I think that's why on fundamentally that thinking of balancing of trade deficit or trade surpluses country to country doesn't make sense. But I have my personal view is this move is more, rather than cutting the trade deficit, it's a more to show the global dominance, because it is no secret that there are two competing powers, China and US, for the global superpower. So with that, he wants to basically disrupt it and try to cut a deal. But of course, I think the way that he's trying to do it interrupts its very own global order that is in place, which challenges the own system, not only for them, for the entire world, is my overall reading.
Right. So we'll get to this global economic order in a minute, but I just want to emphasize the point that where Sri Lanka is concerned, I think we spend an enormous amount on services to the US. We spoke about tech, but then think of all the thousands of Sri Lankan students studying in the US. That doesn't count as exports, right?
Absolutely.
But it's a staggering amount of money which goes out from Sri Lanka. Parents sending their young sons and daughters to the US for undergraduate and graduate degrees, and then you have things like banking, right? I mean, the US dominates much of the world's banks and the banking systems. So if you want to send some money from country A, like Sri Lanka, to country B in another part of the world, chances are it's going through a US bank. It's routed through, and so those US banks are actually earning money off that. I mean, perhaps not always, but that happens as well. So and then there's the franchises. There are so many US restaurant chains which are here in Sri Lanka, and those are run by local organizations, but it's franchises, isn't it? So there's a franchise fee paid for that. And we could go on and on about this, tourism. I mean, you get, you open the Sunday paper, you see all these, Disney World packages and, Alaska cruises and things like that. And whoever can afford that is actually paying a lot of money into the US.
Absolutely.
So all of that. So none of that counts in Donald Trump's equation.
Absolutely. That's one of the main reasons why this argument is flawed, and it is not only common. This argument is not only it is not common. I would say this same argument was also in Sri Lanka, thinking always about the trade deficit. And that's the danger, because a lot of people think when it's a trade deficit, services are included because of poor economic literacy. Services are not included, and that's why people always tend to say we have to manufacture more and manufacture more, sort of a mentality. There is nothing wrong with manufacturing in the first place, but if you are only counting manufacturing, you are not seeing the bigger picture. And that's now a lot of people, that's why if you go to social media on mainstream media, people say, okay, we are consuming more than, I mean, we say we import more than we export. It is true, we import more than we export, but at the same time we export more services and we get remittances, we get income through tourism, and that's how that trade only on commodities or goods deficit being covered by the services exports, including the remittances. So
Right.
so trade deficit doesn't count the services. So that's how and many people think when you okay, we are exporting about 12 billion and we are importing about 22 billion. So a lot of people think that balance $10 billion that we are borrowing, which is not true, because out of that 10 billion we are getting 7 billion from remittances, another 2 to 3 billion from tourism, another few billions from services exports like IT. At the same time, we also import services. For an example, when our people go abroad, like what you said, for those Alaska cruises and Disney World, people take money, and even the pilgrimages that we go to India or wherever. So also there's a services outflow at the same time. And a lot of the US services that we use, I mean, which was from the tech company. So there's a service outflow, but that's how the dollar inflow and outflow balances. It's not that we are borrowing always the trade deficit, and that's why it's fundamentally flawed to think that we have to only think about trade. It is true that we have to manufacture, but critical point is we have to manufacture or even a service. It could be a product or a service on a competitive basis. Our product has to be competitive to the global market, and that's the way out. And that's one reason why Trump's logic is quite flawed. But in a way, giving some credit to his side, Niresh, he had, whoever his advisors had done it in a way that the methodology, while it's flawed, there's a logic to it. Like while the tax rates are quite drastically different from country to country, his logic is, I have taken trade balance as a proxy of the barriers for trade. So in a way, he's giving an argument, we have to open for trade, but I am taking the trade balance as a proxy, which is absolutely, which is a complete wrong assumption. So on that basis, he has imposed tariffs across the world except for China. In China and I think it's a separate story altogether. They have a massive retaliation, but I think it seems that he's trying to use that power and basically push some of their products to the other parts of the world and get a political mileage.
But now help me understand what what type of products can we get from the US? I mean, look, we send our apparel, t-shirts, lingerie, caps, whatever, over there. That's because it's cheaper for the Americans to buy our apparel. Fine. What are we supposed to buy from the US?
Yeah.
Because everything's very expensive there, and also what are the types of goods that they actually produce? Apart from agricultural exports, I mean, wheat and all that, fine, but manufacturing, I don't see what we can buy from them.
Space is very limited, as you very correctly said. Either we have to buy arms from them, which doesn't make sense for our military.
I mean, we need to stop buying arms,
absolutely,
period, because that's one of the reasons we went bankrupt, right?
Absolutely.
And
so
our military budget is still way too high.
Exactly. So that's one of the main things that they produce. Or we have to look at options like aeroplanes. We are Boeing, but as we all know, our fleet is more dominated with
we have an Airbus
fleet. So
and you can't, if you're a small airline, small or medium size, you can't have aircraft fleets, two fleets from Airbus and Boeing,
absolutely.
because any airline has to keep an enormous stock of spare parts. So, these aircraft are running 14, 18 hours a day. You can't afford to keep an aircraft sitting around on the ground. So anything goes wrong, any technical defect, that part is simply taken out and replaced. It's not sort of made, they don't sort of repair it on the aircraft. They take it out, and so there's an enormous, billions worth of spares. And for a small airline, it's not possible.
Absolutely.
Right? And quite apart from that, then you also have the licensing of pilots. Pilots are not allowed to have licenses for 10 different aircraft. I think the maximum is 2 or 3. So, if you have Airbus, you've got A320 license, your 330 license, that's it.
Absolutely.
You can't also have a Boeing license. So, and it's not just pilots, it's I think aircraft engineers have to be licensed. Cabin crew have to be licensed as well. So,
absolutely.
You can't have twice as many people.
Exactly. So our options are limited, and the other available options, I am not saying to buy it, I mean the options in case if the negotiation goes to that level, like what finally can you buy? So then some of the agricultural products, or else maybe considers something like LNG. Or else we import about 3 billion worth of US dollars of fuel. So, but it doesn't make sense for us to import from Texas while we have the access at a reasonable price from Middle East and through Singapore. So,
you have the Middle East on one side, that's a couple of thousand miles away, kilometers away, and on the other side you have the massive, the refineries and all that in Singapore and Malaysia. So why in the world would we buy from, the other side of the world?
Absolutely. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So that's the very reason why this trade deficit country to country cannot be matched at the same time, because your country produces and your country produces for a certain profile of countries, and generally the trade happens with your adjacent countries, because when because the connectivity is better,
the transport
cost is better, insurance, freight, everything is. That's why US earlier had a trade agreement between Canada and Mexico, because those are the adjacent countries and it's easy to trade. For us, it's too far, and even we exporting apparels to there, it's also in a way you call it's against the gravity, because we should have, we have to export for US market, but ideally our export diversification could have happened, more exporting to the region, but it hasn't happened, unfortunately. So as
I
we
mean,
discussed.
the reasoning for that, our apparel to the major market to be the US is simply that the Americans buy a lot more clothes. They change their fashions twice a year, summer fashion, winter fashion. You don't have that in South Asia.
Absolutely.
We wear the same sort of
And also
stuff.
those designs and the complexity of products cannot be also exported to another country, because there's a certain style, there's a designing element to it, there's a fashion element to it, which is basically targeted to
And the
the US
major
market.
fashion labels are there in the US and
Absolutely.
some in
Exactly, and
Europe.
also the spending power, because
Yes.
you cannot, though India has more than 1 billion population, you cannot export the same thing to India. So that's the very reason why you cannot basically set off a trade balance between the two countries. So our options are in that sense quite limited, to if even if you were to buy something from US. And also we need to understand, it is not that country buys from another country. Those are the private companies and entrepreneurs and their consumers who buys it. Even the products, that the apparel products that being bought by the US consumer, they are basically buying that brand, and of course we are a supplier for that big brand or the label. And same when we buy a US product, a software or something, it is not, we are not buying it as a favor for Trump president or for the US. We are buying it because it helps us to get our work done and probably earn a better revenue or a margin by using that product, or it adds some level of convenience or some profitability in our life cycle. So it is not that the country buys from a country, and of course our government really do not have any capacity, because we are running a budget deficit to buy anything from another country in this case. So we have to also understand, it's not country, I mean, countries can minimize the barriers for trade, but ultimately it's the consumers and the companies are the one who are buying, consumers who are buying it in case if it's a final consumable product. Companies are the ones who are buying it if it's an intermediary product or the investment product. So buying, thinking that the countries can buy is also quite flawed. What we can do is, instead we can revise our tariff system, also have our own problems, but this tax is not about, I mean, they say it's a tariff, it's about tariff, but it's not about tariff, it's about trade deficit. But we can make it an opportunity to fix our house, or like we can revise our tariff structure, and that is why what I would like to recommend to do. So then it would help for us to export more and diversify for different markets.
So there are certain steps that we can take, but in the end, it wasn't that Donald Trump was targeting small and medium countries like ours. I don't think that even occurred to him. His beef is with China, Europe, Mexico, Canada, the neighbors and the larger economies. And we've just got caught in somebody else's war, so to speak. Would you say?
No, absolutely. I mean, that's the
We're
danger.
collateral damage here.
Absolutely, and that's the danger overall when we challenge the trade system, because it can cause enormous damage for the entire world. And this is not the first time this has happened. Even if you go to 1920s, even way before this flawed ideology comes, even way before Adam Smith, this was called mercantilism, because people believed that by you have to sell more than you consume. But the truth is, if everyone thinks on the same way, there's no one is going to buy your products, because everyone wants to sell more than what you produce. And at the same time, this mercantilism came because at that point, when you sell things, you collect gold as a currency, because gold was required for the kings to pay their military. So there was this accumulation culture. You sell something and accumulate more and more gold, or as much as possible. So this flawed ideology basically came over a period of time, and that's one reason this this narration that this one country is bad or one nationality is bad or we have to stop buying from them. I think it was common. It comes in different flavors. Even in Sri Lanka, sometimes you say you boycott this, these products, or completely that cancellation culture stems from this mercantilist idea. You only buy someone's product and you abandon someone. It has to be purely based on the benefit, like whether on price, quality, convenience, what it offers has to be the rational decision. But this is how it happened. Even in 1920 this happened. I think during President Nixon's time he also tried with
the early
70s with a 10% flat tariff, because ultimately the final victim of these tariffs would be the US industries and their consumer as well as the rest of the world. But the first line of victim would be none other than the US consumer.
We're in a very intriguing conversation on the global trade war with Dhananath Fernando, CEO of Advocata. Don't go away because we need to take a short commercial break. We'll be right back.
If you do not perform, or if you have not performed, and if you do not perform, this is a protest vote we are going to place, and that signal, that protest vote will go down very well, because the government will know that their popularity is coming down and they will have to arrest it.
This government needs checks and balances.
You can't say only winning parties announce their candidates. There have been it has been time and time again where, candidates are chosen.
Our police is still being restructured and reformed at the moment, and that is part of the reason. But I also think organized crime is a bit unsettled at the moment.
Face the Nation every Wednesday at 9:30 p.m.
What are you doing?
I'm going home.
I'll give it another few hours.
Sam! Ah! All right.
Inspector Kazi.
Prefect. Saturday and Sunday at 6:30 p.m. on TV1.
ඔන්න මෙදා සැරෙත් අවුරුද්දට අපි එනවා
කන්තලේ මධ්‍ය මහාවිද්‍යාලීය ක්‍රීඩාංගණයට
අප්‍රේල් 19 දවස පුරා
අවුරුදු සිරියෙන් පුරවන්න ඔයාලත් එන්න.
අවුරුදු කුමරා කුමරිය බයිසිකල් ධාවන තරගය
ඔරුපැදීමේ තරගය සහ ජන ක්‍රීඩා රසක් සමග
කුරුණෑගල බැජී සංගීතයට ජනප්‍රිය ගායක ගායිකාවන් ගී ගයන
නැගෙන හිරට අවුරුදු
අප්‍රේල් 19 වනදා දවස පුරා
කන්තලේ මැදිවිදුහල ක්‍රීඩාංගණයේදී
ඔබේ ගමේ නගරේ දේශපාලනයේ හෙට දවස සතිය දිනවල සවස 6:30ට
Welcome back to Face to Face. We are with Dhananath Fernando, CEO of Advocata. Now, Dhananath, we were talking about the global mercantile order. This open economy, this capitalism, whatever you want to call it, which dominates the world today, this came from the Americans and the Western Europeans. This is their system, which the rest of the world simply followed. And now Donald Trump is basically upending that system, which doesn't seem fair at all. It's not something that we dreamt up. I mean, the world's banking systems, everything, the trade systems, it's all basically, it's what America wanted for the rest of the world. I mean, we had other systems which failed. You had communism, which the Soviet Union and China were championing, as well as Vietnam and North Korea and all. It didn't work. So that just, it collapsed after a very long time. It took about 60, 70 years, but, it was proven to be a wrong theory, both politically and economically. And then you had other systems like military dictatorships, and that's always failed as well. So this capitalist system is their system. Can't anyone point this out to them?
Yeah, sometimes the common sense is what we all need, but at the same time, Niresh, I would like to even define this system rather than, okay, we can give any name, it's capitalistic system or market system, but it's more also aligning with the evolutionary process, isn't it? Because as human beings, as a type of species, we all want to survive for a longer time, and how as a developed type of species, what we do is we interdepending on each other for our own survival, while compared to another type of species who are fighting and going on the survival of the strongest method. Of course, we go on the basis of survival based on cooperation and interdependence. So I think that's the first principles thinking of trade, because I use something, I mean I trade with you or whoever, which is for my own benefit, not only for my only benefit, it is also for the benefit of the other side. So
Absolutely.
we both win. So it's rather than, you can name it under any name, but it is for our own survival. And as you very correctly said, why the military dictatorships failed, why other systems failed, because it really did not have that bandwidth or leg power to move after a point. And even if you look at the data, it clearly indicates when it comes to coming out of poverty, including China, all the countries including China who embraced the free trade system was the very reason why a lot of people, I mean, to improve their living standards and who came out of poverty. Of course, it's not a perfect system. There are a lot of flaws in that system. I think the Singaporean Prime Minister has spelled it really well. So to fix that, we have to reform that system. But instead, what the US had done is completely rejecting that system. To make it worse, they haven't also proposed any alternative system. They have just rejected the system straight off. And that had created quite chaos, and it is indicated in their own markets. I mean, their billionaires lost a lot of wealth in that two weeks period, and it was quite a devastating experience for the entire world. So it is a process on the survival or the evolutionary system, and that is the way out. I mean, we have to interdependent, because if we are moving away from that, then we are completely thinking of a new thing where our ecosystems, our moral systems, our values, everything then has to be thought in a different way, because we have always been coming from a background, we have to nice to each other, compassionate, we respect each other, and that even the World Trade Organization was built based on those principles. For example, according to the World Trade Organization guideline, you cannot impose a specific tariff targeting a country. That's violating that. They have a guideline called most favored nation. Most favored nation is, you cannot, it doesn't mean, while the term sounds like most favored nation, you are favoring a particular nation. It says if you are offering a certain special offer for a country, it has to be offered for the rest of the countries as well. That's the principle of most favored nation. That is the equality, or like you treating everyone on an equal basis sort of a guideline. So what is going on, as we saw, like there's retaliatory tariff, and I think certain countries now have thinking of stopping exporting rare earth mineral to US, so which basically affects all of us, because we cannot be happy, okay, finally we are out of this tariff for someone else getting the tariff. No, this system affects everyone. I think Chief Seattle, the Red Indian leader, had said it very wisely quite a centuries ago. He had said, we all are a net. If you are damaging one strand of that net, we are basically damaging to the entire strength of that net, which affects us. So the same thing, the Red Indian leaders, of course, it was a different conversation for the land in America, but the trade system is also a net. If you are damaging the net, it affects our own survival, not that we are out of it just because President Trump, if he agrees to have 0% or something, or like a concessionary rate for us, it doesn't mean that we are out of it, because if they have a trade problem with some other country, it affects the US market, it affects their consumption. It ultimately, they will not consume our products as much as they used to do, because if the electricity prices goes up, if their rent goes up, before they move to fashion, they have to pay their day-to-day utilities. So then the consumption will drop, which affects us, which can be quite devastating rather than actually going with an entire tariff thing sometimes. But as at now, we have to more think on the first principles basis, because it's for betterment of our humans as a type of species.
It's basically bad for business.
Absolutely.
When you disrupt things. And in fact, correct me if I'm wrong, but trade is absolutely necessary between nations, because no nation on earth is self-sufficient in everything. I mean, in 2022, when Sri Lanka had no foreign currency to buy anything, we had various people saying, well, let's produce everything here. But how can you? I mean, you might produce all the food you want, but then as soon as you fall sick, where's the medicine coming from? So, that's from India. Are you going to walk? Because vehicles come from Japan, from China, from everywhere else. The petrol and diesel for that comes from the Middle East. So, we're all interdependent. And no matter, even the largest countries like India and the US, they are not self-sufficient. They never were and they never can be. Because basically, it's not possible. Some countries have come close to it, but in the end, you have to trade.
Absolutely, Niresh. And at the same time, even the statistics shows that. Now, even in 1930s, 40s, US had a share of about 30% from the global trade. Now it has come down to about 12 to 13% for all good reasons, because we are.
That's the rest of the world getting, moving up in life, basically.
Absolutely. And at the same time, the nature of the products we have been using from 1930 to 2025 has drastically changed. So that change was possible because of that countries became innovative, and they did their own innovation to get some share of that global trade. And now in this modern world, no country, as you very correctly said, let's forget about everything. Even on a single product, it cannot be manufactured from A to Z in one country. I think there was a famous, I saw even Elon Musk has retweeted it, a video from this famous economist called Milton Friedman. He explains, just take a simple pencil. How many people contributed for this simple pencil? Of course, the graphite must be coming from some mining process in South Africa. That means some South Africans, some people must be working very hard to get that graphite, and probably the wooden part of it must be coming from Brazil or some parts of others. So there must be someone who has manufactured an axe and who is falling that tree and probably transporting it, and there's a mechanical process to cut it, chop it, so many things. And there was a rubber thing at the back of at the end of the pencil,
the little eraser.
Little eraser. So that has to be come from somewhere, and there was a small steel
metal ring which keeps that in place.
Absolutely. So the metal must come from somewhere. So even it's a very basic product, there has to be about 100, 200, I don't know, 100 or whatever that number of countries and millions of people who have contributed without knowing what they are contributing for. And that's how that simple pencil had come. Let's forget about rest of producing everything. That's the simple pencil. And it is the same for everything. That's what you call that global supply chains. No product can be manufactured in one selected country. It's always everyone contributes their own share, even without they know it for a greater cause, but they don't know the final product. No one. I mean, the South African who is in those graphite mines may not know this is for a pencil or a battery or whatever. So that's how the world has basically connected, knowingly or unknowingly.
And even that particular graphite mine, I mean, the equipment needed to do the mining.
Absolutely.
I mean, and even the hard hats which the miners are wearing.
Absolutely.
Where's that from?
Exactly.
Some other countries.
Absolutely. And the technology, not only the goods part of it, the know-how, the services, the endurance that you require to do that mining process, and someone to invest the land. So basically, we all have been on the beneficiary end of this trade system, and that's why when you challenge that own system, which is a problem for our own survival, this is a problem of on that animal instinct point of view, your survival has been threatened.
And some countries produce some goods more efficiently and cheaper than others. Let's take for an example Cuba and sugar. Cuba produces, I think, most of the world's sugar, including the sugar that we put in our cup of tea. I mean, we do have our own sugar manufacturers, but correct me if I'm wrong, but I think only about 20-25% of our sugar is domestic, and the production cost of our sugar is far greater than buying it from Cuba. So, so we have actually, I'm not sure whether this is correct now, but for a long time, we had high tariffs on sugar coming out of Cuba.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there have also midnight gazettes which caused a lot of scams also on sugar, and that's a separate story.
That's a separate story.
But Adam, you were absolutely right. Yeah. So that's why the trade system is important. I think there was an excellent speech by the Prime Minister of Singapore to the Parliament yesterday, and he basically understands, he explains the broader problem. One is, don't see it only as a tariff problem. This is a problem overall for the system that humans we have all created for our own betterment, number one. Number two, there's a flawed ideology thinking protectionism, or thinking that we can manufacture or we should only export, not import. People think that that's called the protectionism is patriotism. That's completely wrong. Protectionism
it doesn't work.
It doesn't work, and it's not patriotism. It is in fact it is going against those principles. And the third one, he says, at the same time, we are in a new era, because even the World Trade Organization, IMF, even the UN, all those set up those shock absorbers were there for the realignment or the stability of this system, and now it has been challenged. So we have to be cautious, but we have to navigate through these turbulent times. So I think that's the takeaway message for all of us, that understanding the trade and manufacturing everything is not possible. It doesn't mean under any means we should not manufacture. We have to manufacture, but on comparative basis. If someone else is doing it better, it is always better to buy it from them, because if we try to manufacture it on our own, our cost bases are high, and by selling it to our own consumers at a higher price, you are doing a massive injustice for our consumers, because the additional amount they pay, actually that could have been money that they could have spent somewhere else, because they are spending somewhere else is an income for someone else.
Right. Instead, it's going as tariffs to the government.
Absolutely. So we have to think that. And also, what another important factor that the Singaporean Prime Minister mentioned was, when you increase the trade barriers, it's very difficult to bring it down, because when you increase it, there are vested interest groups who gets the benefit out of it. It's like the underworld. It's easy to say that you completely curtail them, but when there's a system already running, when you try to curtail that, the resistance comes within. So when you increase the trade barriers, it's the nature of it is, it's easy to say, people say, okay, something happens, you put import barriers, you ban imports, you increase tariffs. It's easy to do that, but bringing it down is very, very difficult, because the vested interest comes in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, something puzzles me. Now, in the evolution of a nation, we call it development. There's the nations which are enjoying life at the highest levels, and then there's us, and then there's countries which are worse, but everyone's striving to get up there. And the point is, to get up there, you can't be doing the same sort of thing that you were doing when you were down here. You've got to evolve. It's evolution of a nation, of a society, of an economy. So, which means that if you were, growing potatoes down here, you can't expect to get up to that level by simply growing potatoes for another 100 years, right? You've got to evolve. Your workforce has to move up, has to get skilled, maybe the next generation, or within a generation, you learn new skills. And the same goes for businesses. Businesses need to evolve as well. And they can't still be doing potatoes in 100 years. So now in the US, what has happened? Have they not evolved enough? Because when their, let's say their factory jobs moved to China, shouldn't the US workers have learnt new skills to go to a higher level of manufacturing, services, whatever, manufacture airplanes instead of the basic stuff which they now get the Chinese to do. So isn't that the fundamental problem? Because Donald Trump is trying to bring these manufacturing jobs back to the US, which means that the US worker is actually supposed to step downwards?
Absolutely. No, very, very valid point. That's why it doesn't work. Actually, not that, US had progress reasonably well. If you look at their numbers, they have done very well. And there was, I saw I really cannot recall the name of that professor. He said the US had a excellent tool for development. It called the H1B1 visa, because that's how they got a lot of intellectual people to their country to do that innovation.
Yes.
He said that's the most powerful weapon we had, H1B1 visa. And most of I come from University of Colombo as a science graduate. Most of our top-notch graduates are basically in US. They have taken citizenship and they are not coming, they are not returning. They have settled there and they are US citizens, and we are very happy for them. But all that,
that's Sri Lankans, but you get millions of Indians, of Chinese,
exactly, Chinese all over the world,
cream of those countries.
Absolutely, go there and contribute for US companies and services. So that's how US basically expanded, and that was the logic, because you don't only trade between goods, you trade knowledge, experiences, and that's how you become innovative. And as you very correctly said, there's no reason why you should go down, because when a country progresses, that's the system. For an example, the Asian countries, we had reasonable labor at the beginning, and now when we are moving ahead, we try to produce more and more complex, complicated products with technology development. So general upscaling is you start with apparel or basic product, then you slowly move for some parts and components of the technological industry. You do mobile phones or TVs or whatever that thing, and then you bring robotics, and that's how you basically go with the revolution cycle. And that's exactly what US did. But of course, there are challenges in any system. There are challenges. There are certain cases of protectionism, but by just taking that single examples as there's outlier cases, and if you try to generalize it, that basically will not give you the broad and the clear picture.
And also, Dhananath, a lot of the manufacturing jobs in the world are now moving to AI and robots, basically. For decades in Japanese car manufacturers, basically, those factories have been automated, and we see those it's there on TV, in the movies, the robots at work. They're doing everything from the welding to the painting, and the humans are actually making sure that the robots are in working order. That's what, one breaks down, then it's humans who have to fix that. So it's all evolved. So this, Donald Trump trying to say, let's bring back the factories and factory workers, create the jobs. It's just going backwards, isn't it?
Absolutely. It doesn't work in that way. And that's the importance of all the world leaders and policymakers need to understand the global trade system and to do the necessary reforms to establish that. And I think that's where the direction that the Sri Lanka has also need to move forward, because even if you look at our own tariff structure, way before President Trump imposed 44% that announcement, we had tariff about 200-300% on vehicles, 50% on rice. So we also basically doing very unreasonable, charging very unreasonable taxes from our own people.
I mean, we are the land of the midnight gazette, where there's no discussion. Even within a ruling party, there's no discussion. It's suddenly government needs money. So you wake up in the morning and a gazette has been issued. Yeah. There was one government, one ruling party which actually waited for our cricket team to win matches, and lo and behold, something goes up in price. So that's not good economic theory.
Absolutely.
So we need to rethink our tariff structures for our own good.
Absolutely. So that's one of the main recommendations by us. There are very few immediate solutions that we have for this problem. But however, on immediate actions, there are immediate actions which will bring us long run benefits, and one of it is reforming our tariff structure, cut down para tariffs, cess and pal, and that is even in the government's manifesto. So they have a mandate by the people to do it, simplify it, and at the same time think of that national single window, which has been like a decades old discussion. It's just a matter of implementation, taking action to it, and then think of the regional integration with India. But also we need to understand this export diversification is a process. It's just not like you cannot do it overnight. You have to think of products, and that happens when you make our factors of manufacturing right: land, labor, capital and entrepreneurship. We have to provide adequate land to do things in small scale. We have to provide labor, change those labor laws so we can acquire better talent, and then we have to have capital to do it. So when you do that, only it is possible for us to diversify markets, and also we have to make this an opportunity to strengthen our trade as well as what you call the geopolitical relationships, because what we have been doing is basically fighting with all our neighbors. For an instance, we had this LRT issue, then the Japanese were not very happy about it. Then we had this Chinese fertilizer thing, Chinese were not happy with us. Then we were fighting with US on MCC and so many other things. We haven't been treating them well. And with Indians, all these East Container Terminal too, we haven't been treating the way that we should have treated them as a neighbor. And with Russians, there was this asbestos ban, and there was a insect coming out, and there was a ban, and there was another story. And with Middle East, of course, with this burial issue during COVID, they were not happy. So across the world, all the people who were with us to support, we have been completely making them upset.
So we've been fighting with so many countries over things we should not be fighting.
Absolutely.
And in the end, we lost in almost every instance. It was Sri Lanka which lost out.
Absolutely.
So a lot of lessons to be learned, lot to be changed in the way we run things in Sri Lanka, as Dhananath said. But I'm afraid that we'll have to wait for another occasion. Dhananath Fernando, CEO of Advocata, thank you very much for joining me this evening.
Thank you, Nilesh. Thank you for having me.
And thank you to you at home for watching. Don't go away, because the news is coming up next. Have a great evening.